So in 1097, three armies gathered at Constantinople a year after the Pope put out the call for the First Crusade. The majority of the knights were French, however, there were Bohemians, Germans, English, and Spaniards there as well. This group of crusaders was very ill prepared for war. They didn't know the terrain, they weren't prepared for the terrain, they didn't have enough food, didn't have enough water, they didn't know where each oasis was, where each friendly village was along the way. So very, very hampered even from the beginning. Also, they had no leader. Each different army had a different duke who charged it. And they worked together, but they didn't have one clear, cohesive leader or strategy. So that also hampered them. By the time they made it to Jerusalem, only 12,000, which was one-fourth of the original army, was able to besiege and take Jerusalem. That happened on July 15, 1099. So they won a small strip of land from Edessa to Jerusalem, and they divided that up into 4 feudal states, each run by a different now Christian king. These areas, however, were very vulnerable to counterattack. In 1144, Edessa was retaken by the Turks. A second crusade was launched to take back the city. However, the Crusaders straggled home in defeat, so they did not do very well. In 1187, Saladin, who was in charge of the Muslim army at that time, took back Jerusalem. The Third Crusade was launched to retake the Holy Land yet again, and it was led by the three most powerful monarchs in England at the time. Philip II of France, also known as Augustus, German Emperor Frederick I, whose nickname was Barbarossa, because he had red hair. Barba, hair, Rosa, red. And then the English King Richard the Lionheart was the third. This is the same one from the Robin Hood myth, where he goes on the Crusades, brother takes the throne and comes back. So same Richard the Lionheart. And this crusade, just like the others, had problems even from the beginning. Philip was angered with Richard. They argued, so Philip went home, took his army with him. Barbarossa went on the ships, him and Richard got along. However, he was shipwrecked and he drowned. So Richard decided to go on the crusade alone. So in 1192, Richard and Saladin signed a truce. Things did not go very well for Richard. Lost a lot of troops. Just not a very well planned, very well thought out strategy. He did not defeat Saladin, but it was clear that them fighting was hurting both sides, so they decided to sign a truce that would be mutually beneficial. But Jerusalem would remain in Muslim hands, but pilgrimages would be given safe passage and would be allowed to worship and travel freely. After that, the crusading spirit dwindles. There were several other crusades that were launched. In 1204, the Fourth Crusade failed miserably. In fact, all the crusaders met in Constantinople, and instead of going on, they looted the city and plundered all of the gold and riches that they could. And then there were 4 more crusades that were launched after that, each one more unsuccessful than the last. There were also a few children's crusades. In the year 1212, thousands of children set out to conquer Jerusalem. No military training, no money, no weapons. They were led by a 12-year-old from France named Stephen of Blois. Stephen had a vision from God telling him that they could take the Holy Land. So armed with just this vision and that's it, they decided to march out and head to Jerusalem. So 30,000 children marched with nothing but a belief in God, and they marched to go to Constantinople and then to the Holy Land. Well, to do that, they had to travel over the Alps. So, when they traveled across the Alps, many died from cold, starvation, and exposure. Then they got on ships, and they were either shipwrecked and drowned at sea, or the captains of the ships sold the children into slavery. So it was a complete disaster. Here is a picture of the Children's Crusade. You have Stephen up front here, and he sees his vision from God of the Holy Land. And you see all the children armed with their shepherd staves, going to take on the Muslim army, and obviously they don't make it. And if that wasn't enough, the kids decided to try again. This time under Nicholas of Cologne. 20,000 German children went to Rome to get the Pope's blessing and then go on to take the Holy Land. Once again, to get there they had to cross the Alps. So while crossing the Alps, thousands of them died from cold exposure and starvation. A few of them survived, and they actually go to the Pope in Rome. The Pope told him, "Thanks for coming out, but go home and wait. You're too young. Come back when you're older." By the time they get back to Germany, only 2,000 returned. Some of these people did not go back to Germany. They decided to continue on. They set sail for the Holy Land, but were never heard from again. Either they were shipwrecked or more than likely sold into slavery again. The Spanish Crusade, a little bit different here. This crusade was actually successful. The Spanish Crusade is known as the Reconquista, and the entire point of this crusade was to drive the Moors, who were Muslims who had taken over most of Spain, out of the country, and to unite the country under one king and queen, and having it be Spanish. By the 1400s, the Moors held only one small part of Spain in the south, known as Granada. In 1492, Granada finally fell to the Christian army of Ferdinand and Isabella. Same Ferdinand and Isabella that are going to fund Columbus's expedition where he finds the New World. After the Spanish armies conquered a territory, an inquisition was set up. These were Spanish courts made up of the clergy that to suppress heresy. When the Spanish came in and defeated the Muslims, many Jews had been living there and many Muslims stayed, and they then converted to Christianity. However, they were still tortured and burned as they felt that they were not real Christians, that they were only doing this for their own personal reasons, that they didn't really want to become Christian. So then finally in 1492, Jews and Muslims were formally expelled from Spain and not allowed to return. Here we have a painting, a tapestry of the Reconquista, and you'll notice on this side you have Spanish knights, but you also have on this side Muslims fighting with the Spanish. That would oftentimes would happen. Some of the Muslims would side with the Spaniards, and they would actually be allies against one another. Here we have a map, and this shows the Reconquista, and it took several hundred years for this to happen. This is France over here in blue. Before 914, this was the only part that remained under Spanish control. And then from 914 to 1080, you notice they conquered a little bit further south, and then a little more, then Cordoba, and then finally, like I said, the Granada was the last Muslim kingdom to fall. The effects of the Crusades. While the men were gone, women were left at home, and they had to manage the household affairs. So they get more responsibilities in society because of that. Crusades also expanded trade, with people going to the Middle East, to the Holy Land. They're bringing European goods with them, but bringing goods from the Middle East back. And along with those goods, they're also bringing ideas. This will weaken the power of the Pope and the feudal lords. With these crusades being unsuccessful, many people blame the Pope for this, so his power and authority over people is weakening as a result. Feudal lords, now the people going on crusades, many of them are getting land and titles along the way, so they don't need their feudal lords as well. Plus, many of the feudal lords that went on crusades spent all their fortunes doing it, so they have no more money. This also, on the negative side, led to intolerance and prejudice, which would lead to bitterness and hatred between Christians and Muslims. And this is really where things get started here, and also against Christians and Jews, because the Crusaders needed financing, they needed money and loans, and the only people that could give these loans were Jews, and then many people were resentful when they had to pay these loans back. So this is really the beginnings of a lot of problems that are still seen today in the world, and it stems from the Crusades. Changes in medieval society. So there's a growing food supply. During the Middle Ages or medieval times, same different words, same time period. There was a global warming period. The temperatures across the board were getting warmer, which means you had a better climate, a longer growing season, which means you could grow more crops and different types of crops in a single growing season, which means better diets, which is then going to lead to an increased population. You also have a switch to horsepower. Oxen were previously used to plow the fields and everything because they were easier to feed, but oxen are very slow. They can't do as much work as quickly as a horse. Horses were much better for work. They could do 3 times as much work in a single day as an ox, but they did require more food. And then in the year 900, a harness for horses was made so that they could drag a plow, so they could really do a lot more than the oxen could. In 800, the 3-field system was utilized. Before this, it was half the land you own, you plant on, the other half you would lay in fallow so that it could replenish itself and get nutrients back in the soil. Now, if you divide your land into thirds, you can use plant on 2/3, leave 1/3 in fallow to replenish itself. Now you're using 2/3 of the land every year, so you're getting more crops, and when you have more food available and better food available, you have an increase in population. We discussed that before. The guilds. Guilds are organizations of individuals in the same business or occupation that work to improve the economic and social conditions of its members. These are the predecessors of today's modern labor unions, and they work and act in the same way as labor unions do today. They set wages, have apprenticeship programs to bring new people in, and they fight for the rights of the people in the labor union, or in this case, the guild. So the first one were merchants and skilled artisans. Back then it would be glassmakers, winemakers, things like that. Today we have plumbers, pipe fitters. Those are all different types of labor unions. They set standards for quality of work, wages, working conditions, how many hours, things like that. And like I said, they had their apprenticeship program to train new workers. So if you worked in a guild, and the guilds themselves were very wealthy, and that money brought in from the guilds mean they were influential in the government. There was also a commercial revolution, and fairs and trades are what's going to start this. Every time there was a religious holiday, there would also be a fair. So you'd have jugglers, fire breathers, things like that, almost like things you might see at a circus. You would also have little merchant shops. People would sell the excess goods that they had: cloth, bacon, salt, honey, cheese, wine, all those things. Traders began coming to these great fairs with goods from foreign lands and selling them to people as well. So now you have a trade network that is starting in Europe in the Middle Ages. Business and banking. In Europe, you saw banking increase because of the Crusades, and then it's going to continue after that. So people would need large amounts of cash and ways to exchange currency with all this new trade going on between countries and between continents. So the first banks had bills of exchange rates. $1 was worth this many doubloons, or whatever the case may be, giving you an exact exchange rate. People would also issue letters of credit, so you didn't have to carry around a bag of money with you. So you'd write this letter of credit that the person holding this is entitled to 30 pounds of silver. So now you take this one piece of paper to a different bank to conduct its business elsewhere. Trading firms were established, and usury laws were relaxed. Usury laws were made by the church, saying that if you loan money, you couldn't charge an interest rate. Once those go away, now banks can loan out money and make a profit, which means that you have more banks springing up.